Good evening or good afternoon for those who are listening from overseas. Welcome to tonight's shiur, Panorama of Halocho. It's actually nearing to 5 years since we've been doing this, since Tov Pei. Baruch Hashem, better times, at least in this part of the world. So I'm going to start off with a Siyum Rambam, because we're now finishing today. We finish the first volume of Rambam, which is Sefer haMada, and we begin the second volume, which is Sefer Avo. So I'm going to read the last halacha. It's very clear that the love of Hashem will not be bound in the heart of a person until he will. The word yishge means here like indulge or be involved within it continually. Karoi v'yazoiv kol mashe ba'olam chutz mimeno, and he should be neglecting anything else besides his relationship to Hashem. As we have it in the parasha, v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, with all your heart and all your soul. Ve'eino oyev hakadosh baruch hu elo b'das sheyedo eyu. You can love Hashem through the knowledge. The knowledge brings to the love. And it's commensurate to the awareness. That will be the love. Im ma'at, I think that's a mistake. That should be an aleph mem. Im ma'at ma'at v'im harbe harbe. If it's a little, then a little bit of das, a little bit of ava. If there's a lot of das, there'll be a lot of ava. Therefore, a person should focus. To think and to contemplate with areas of wisdom and understanding, who will give him an awareness of his master, his creator, according to human capacity. So this is the Rambam's Siyum of Sefer haMada, Sefer of knowledge or Sefer of awareness. Then starts off Sefer Avo, and classically starts off with a posuk, Mo ahavti Torah secho, kol hayom hisichosi. I love your Torah. It's what I talk about the whole day, and that really connects with the end of the previous halacha, the end of Sefer haMada, and then he goes into the list of the halachas, and he starts off with the halacha. It's a mitzvah saseh to say Shema twice a day, and then we have pamayim b'chol yom koyim shema be'erev b'boker, mitzvah to read the Shema twice, morning and evening and morning, and it quotes from the Shoch B'chol v'kumecha. I just want to add that I was learning in Torah earlier this week something which I never noticed. You say in Shema, it's at the beginning of Parshas Vayakhel. You say in Shema, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then it goes on to V'ahavta, and he says what's very obvious. Hashem Echad is a statement of a fact. It's an awareness of the oneness of Hashem. And then it goes V'ahavta, and that's the very point which the Rambam is saying. It's the awareness which will bring the emotion. By contemplating on the Echad, that will bring you to the V'ahavta. That's a very simple. I've never really put together how the echad, thinking about the echad, is the conduit to bring to the avo, but that's much what the Rambam is saying over here. So that's the Siyum of the Rambam, and I want to just share with you also. Thank you, Rabbi Cantor, who's with us, who has encouraged me to include the Siyum Rambam on at the shiur, and he also brought me to my attention a diuk of Rav Yaakov Moshe Wolberg, which is he picked up on a halacha in the second chapter of Rambam Hilchos Krishma, which is the third of the three parokim for today. And the Rambam writes, very well-known piece, Keitzad Yadakdek. What does it mean you should be articulate when you read the Shema. Yishmer, you should take heed. Not to soften where it's meant to be emphasized. Vayakhel, or yachazik perhaps. Harofe, and not to stress where it should be soft. Now this comes back to a discussion a couple of weeks ago. We had a whole thing about is it solalu or tolalu, and about shvono and shvonach. So you've got the nach. The nach is the silent shva, and the nod, or the nod means the moving one, and no, shvono with an ayin. Shvono is also means the moving one. So do not relax the moving shva, and do not move the relaxing shva. That's those words in the blue. Lefichach, therefore, sorach liten revach ben hadvekim. Therefore, it's imperative that you give a bit of space where otherwise they are very close to one another. Ben kol shtei asius hademus, when you've got two letters which are identical. She'achas men soif teva v'hachas betchilas teva hasmuchala. When you've got two words, one ending and the other one beginning with the same letter. K'goyim b'chol levavcha. So the Rambam says, you know what you should do? Koyre b'chol, pause, and then v'koyre chayze v'koyre levavcha. Right, that's fairly simple. But the very interesting thing is that until you read this piece of Rambam and you've learned the Gemara, how it's Mishnah and Gemara, and you understand that why should you not say b'chol levavcha? Because you are missing a letter effectively. If it's b'chol levavcha, there's only one lamed when there needs to be two lameds. That's how you normally understand. But the Rambam is presenting it differently. He's saying like this: my name is Yitzchok. Now, never mind how you pronounce the tzaddik. It's also shvonach, but the kuf is also a shvo. It's just they don't put it. It's cheaper on ink, but you don't need to have a shvo under the kuf of Yitzchok, because everyone knows it's a shvonach. But there's also a shvo there. It's a shvonach. So Nama is saying on the word bechol. Well, so the lamed is a shvonach. The word levavcha, the lamed is a shvonah. So now, following on, not to distort between the moving shva and the silent shva, if you do b'chol levavcha, so that lamed is either going to be a shvonah or it's going to be a shvonach. So either way, someone has been done out. One of the lameds, he's not talking. He doesn't focus on the missing lamed. Let's say the lamed could double up for both, but the problem is that it's either going to be a le or ul. So it's either going to be b'chol levavcha, and then you've got no shvonah, or it's been b'chol levavcha, so then it's the lamed should have been nach. It's going to be no. So it's very interesting how the Rambam is certainly different to the Poshta Pshat as you read it in the Gemara. So that was Rabbi Wolberg's diuk, and so that's he didn't give an answer, and neither am I at the moment. Let's now move on to inyonim, which are inyonim ha'imdim al haperik, important stuff, and we're all gearing up to an unusual kviyas, an unusual setting of Pesach, where Shabbos is Erev Pesach. In a way, it's very relaxing, because when the time normally before the Seder, you're all stressed and been working a whole day, and here, once you've had your chometz, you can then have a 6-hour nap for the afternoon in this part of the world, so you can come to the Seder all rested. So that's a very nice thing about it. But meanwhile, I'm looking at two scenarios. One is for Botei Chabad, Communal Sedorim, and one is for ourselves, where we've got this, that's going to be question number 3, about eating chometz for the two sudas, and still the rest of everything, and the rest of the house is Pesach. But let's first deal with the Communal Sedorim. And I'm not sure whether this year is later than other years. It seems to be that little bit later. I'm not sure exactly why, but that's what it's as it is. Always we have this problem that the Seder night is so late, and we wanted people to come, and you tell them to come at 9:15, we'll say, I'll see you in the morning, kind of stuff. So we want to have the Seder start at a reasonable time where people will not be put off by the lateness of the hour. And so in our own homes, as I said, we're going to have our 6 hour nap, and then we'll come, right, come Nacht. And so then, as soon as Nacht will come, then all of a sudden we'll start waking up and start saying Kiddush and setting up the tables and it'll take us a good half an hour, 3/4 of an hour till we'll actually start making Kaddish. That's all very well in your own house, but when you're doing a public Seder, you can't afford that kind of time. So you want to have the table all set in time. Now, we're looking for a solution to be able to start the Seder, the communal Seder, as soon as possible, as early as possible. So one thing is to set the tables. Can you set the tables? Is there a way you can set the tables on Shabbos afternoon? Now, if you have facilities, you have a room which you can set the table before Shabbos, and then from Friday already, it's all set up. That's beautiful. Most of us do not have that available facility. So it's going to be a question of setting up. Can you set up the tables for the public Seder on Shabbos afternoon? So here's two possibilities. Number one, many shluchim are doing this. They're going to be calling the Seder for 7:30 or something, and they're going to start off with perhaps a light meal, or some kind of buffet, however they're going to work. They're going to offer food earlier. And then perhaps they'll do a Ma'ariv or to do a question and answer, or however they're going to entertain until Nacht. And then they'll start Kaddish at Nacht. Now, if you are doing that, if you are going to be serving food before Shkia, before sunset, so then you've got every excuse to prepare tables, put down tablecloths, put down chairs. You can also, when people come, you could really already allocate where each person will sit, so that you could do yourselves on Shabbos, because you're serving a shalosh seudos, so that's not a problem. Let's just discuss that a bit more carefully. Until what time can you serve this food before sunset? So until sunset, you can serve food. When it comes sunset, really, you should not be serving food. Why not? Well, it's not a meal as such. And once it's after Shkia, so ready, you don't eat before Havdalah, and you don't eat before Kiddush. So before Havdalah, we'll see b'hemshech shiur, that's the last point on our shiur, there is some leeway to allow eating until Vaday Laila, until there's room to be mekel, and many people are mekel. But before Kiddush, it seems to be less, there's less latitude there, and therefore you cannot serve food after sunset. Having said that, I don't think there's a chiyuv to whip away the food at the table if there is anything left there. Okay, if some people will have some food afterwards, certainly you don't have to clear their plates away. Say that, all right, so that's one way of saving time. You're able to set the tables yourselves, and because you're going to be serving shalosh seudos before sunset. Now, the next thing is the next option is that if you are doing a large crowd, in any case, it would be advisable to have help. So, can you have a goy set the tables? And now we're talking about not just setting tables with, but I'm talking about putting up matzahs and putting up kairos and getting everything in place, the hagodas in place and cups and sauces, whatever it may be. And that you can do. You can have a goy do that on Shabbos afternoon. And where's that coming from? So you've got here on the screen, you've got a couple of sources. This is from the Piskei Teshuvos, where he says, "Are you allowed to have a goy prepare on on Shabbos l'chayil, and b'mkoim hefsed tzarich mitzvah you can be matir. And then he goes for it's a couple of times in Piskei Teshuvos. One is in Hilchos Shabbos, and one is in Hilchos Yom Tov. And he refers here in Hilchos Yom Tov, he refers us to the Das Torah of the Marsham, the Bejana Rov, was one of the most prominent poskim in Galicia in his time. And this is in Tov Mem Daled in Arachaim, where he says the following, talking about Erev Pesach Shechol B'Shabbos. ונסתפקנו על ידי עקום בדבר שאין מלאכה, יש לו משori עד כאן. So he quotes the Moed Avraham. Now, the Moed Avraham famously says that you're not allowed to prepare from one day to the other, and even to roll the Sefer Torah on day one of Yom Tov for the second day of Yom Tov, or on Shabbos for Yom Tov, or even on Yom Tov for Shabbos, which is irrelevant this year. But even if you made an Erev Tefillin, where you're allowed to cook on Friday for Shabbos, that doesn't allow you to roll the Sefer Torah on Friday for Shabbos, because it's nothing to do with food. So you're not allowed to do any hachonis. The Alter Rebbe talks about this also in Tov Kuf Gimel. He talks there about not fetching wine from the cellar on Yom Tov for Yom Tov night. The background of this is in Siman Tofrei Samach Zayin, where it talks about Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. You mustn't prepare the tables for the Simchas Torah Kiddush on Shmini Atzeres afternoon. So the Pri Megadim says, I'm not sure whether you can ask a goy. Where the Masham says, your Yesh Loima becomes by Mira Vadai. Im Ken Yesh Lahokil L'Sadei Alidei Akum. V'yavshu Hukasa B'Mekimesupuk. Although the Pri Megadim wrote, I'm not sure, Kedarke Hatoiv, that's his humble style. So we have here clear, we have a clear heter to have a goy prepare the tables and prepare to set the tables on Shabbos afternoon, that it should be ready for Motzei Shabbos. So although here he's talking about a Yom Tov, I don't see a big difference. Even if you don't rely on the Pri Megadim over here, you have the principle of Shvus de Shvus L'Tzorech Mitzvah. You're allowed to ask a goy to do an Issa D'Rabbanan L'Tzorech Mitzvah. And I emphasize, if you had a spare room where you could set up the place before Shabbos, that's what you should be doing, because you have the option. But if you don't have the spare room, so then this is your only option. So then, because the concept of Shvus de Shvus L'Tzorech Mitzvah is because is only when you don't have an option. Let me just digress for a moment. It'll come Yom Tov, and the lady wants to light the candles, and she doesn't have a flame. Can she ask a goy to strike a match so that she should be able to light her candles for Yom Tov? And the answer is yes, because striking a match on Yom Tov is an Issa D'Rabbanan. So to ask a goy to strike a match is called Shvus de Shvus. It's for the purpose of a mitzvah of lighting the candles for Yom Tov, or perhaps to prepare to heat up the food for Yom Tov. So that Shvus de Shvus L'Tzorech Mitzvah is okay. But having said that, every frum house knows that L'Chatchila you prepare a Yortzeit candle, so that you should be able to take a fire from there and not ask the goy to strike a match for you. So Shvus de Shvus L'Tzorech Mitzvah is only a b'diavad solution, not a L'Chatchila. But you don't have another room, that's a b'diavad, so you'll be allowed to ask a goy to do those preparations. So we've dealt with two solutions so far. If you're serving food for a Shalosh Seudos type, you can prepare the tables. If you're not doing that and you want to just prepare the tables immaculately in time, you can have a goyish waitress to set the tables on Shabbos afternoon. That would also be fine. Now, one more point. So I've also spoken about serving food before the shkia. We've said that till the shkia that's okay. One more point I'd like to address is some shluchim are still trying to cut out 10 minutes of the delay. Is there any room to allow making Kiddush a little early? Then the issue here is that we have 3 stars, And then we've got what's called Tosfos Shabbos. And then in many communities, Tosfos Shabbos is quite a significant amount of time after Tzesek HaChom. You look on Chabad.org, you'll see Tzesek HaChom according to the Alter Rebbe, which is approximately when the sun is approximately 6 degrees beneath the horizon. And then the standard Motzei Shabbos in Hamish communities is when the sun is 8.5 degrees beneath the horizon. The difference can be about 20 minutes. Do you have to have such a long Tosfos Shabbos? Is debatable. Here's but we don't want to tamper with that, and that's really a policy which we've taken here. Motzei Shabbos, we're not going to start saying, "Oh, the Alter Rebbe says you can do it earlier." We're not going to tamper with Motzei Shabbos, and I don't think it's a good idea to tamper with Motzei Shabbos time in front of your community either. But what about doing Kiddush early, and then, what do you do about Havdalah? Well, how about doing Kiddush early and not saying the bracha B'Orei Moriah? You'll say the bracha haMada ben Kodesh leKodesh, but you won't say the B'Orei Moriah, and the ladies won't have lit candles yet. Okay, and then 15 minutes later, when you look at the clock, it's now already Motzei Shabbos for everyone. They'll know. All right, then the ladies will light candles, and then you will say bracha B'Orei Moriah. That is a possibility. Yeah, that is a possibility, and that will save you, if necessary, it can save you 10, 15 minutes, perhaps, to start that little bit earlier. Similarly, some people were asking about, so some shluchim talk about davening Ma'ariv, and some shluchim, that's not an issue because they're used to davening Ma'ariv on their own later on, so we're not going to that. But the shluchim who do want to daven Ma'ariv, can you daven Ma'ariv from sometime earlier? So normally, the advice is not. You don't do Ma'ariv early. But if you start Ma'ariv in a way that by the time you finish Ma'ariv, it's already Motzei Shabbos, then again, I think that is allowable. So if Ma'ariv is, especially it's going to be the night of Pesach, it's with Hallel. If Ma'ariv takes 25 minutes, if you start Ma'ariv 25 minutes before Motzei Shabbos, so the time you finished Ma'ariv, so then no one's going to do Bimlocha before because they know Ma'ariv is at the end of Motzei Shabbos is the end of Ma'ariv. So to daven Ma'ariv early and then to say it's still Shabbos is very confusing. But if you kind of work it out that by the time you finish Ma'ariv, Shabbos is over, okay, so again you can gain that amount of time. Right. Of course, if you do that, make sure to say Shema later on, because you have said Shema before Tzesek HaChom. Right, so those are a few details about the communal Seder, and trying to find ways of starting it that little bit earlier. I'm going to go now to our own Hamish homes, where we've been till Pesach, we've been frantically getting rid of every last speck of chometz. And in many homes, a week before Pesach, they're living on potato chips. And now it comes Shabbos, Erev Pesach. Oh, you have to have lechem mishnah. And lechem mishnah, you can't have matzah because you got malchus. Yeah, if you had bezdin, if you had hasra and you ate a matzah on Erev Pesach, you'd get malchus. Yeah. So it's really not worth it. Yeah. So now you're going to have chometz for lechem mishnah. So how are you going to straddle this? The whole house is Pesach dik, and at the same time you're going to have chometz for lechem mishnah by night and by day. Okay. So general advice is to use something like pita bread rather than stuff with crusty, crumbly challah. Sesame, by the way, is only Kitniyos. But when the sesame's on the challah, it's going to be all over. It's also not fun. Okay. I want to share with you one of my hidurim for Pesach is my parents, Aleim Hashalom, had the chumrah. If anything falls on the floor, you don't use it till the end of Pesach next year. So I followed that chumrah, but being a nervous person as I am, so my hidur is to use disposable cutlery over Pesach. So then if something falls to the floor, I don't blow my top, so to speak. Okay. So now we're trying to deal with having chometz and then having our meal. And the meal would be typically served in Pesach dishes, or Pesach food, rather, because otherwise, if you're going to have chometz pots and pans, what you're going to do with them afterwards? You can't wash them up afterwards because you don't need them. You can't wash stuff on Shabbos which you don't need. So therefore, the popular wisdom is you'll prepare your fish and your meat and your potatoes, whatever, all in Pesach dishes, basically pots and pans, and you'll serve it at the table with disposables, so that even if people are going to just have had chometz in their mouth and now they're going to use cutlery, that cutlery will end in the bin and it won't be used on Pesach. So that's one thing out of the way. Let's go a little bit more lomdus problems. So now one problem here is there's a concept called siluk shulchan. So in the good old days, they had at the end of the meal, okay, we've finished the formal meal, and now we're going to have a sweet table. And that's a new kum ataresa zweitemal. So it's now second time round. So now you finish the meal, and here it says in Shulchan Aruch, any of these sweets which you're going to have after you've gone away from the table is now it's a panum chadoshes. You have to make a new bracha before and after. Yeah. So now this is the question. You're going to have your haMotzi at one table, let's say, and then everyone is going to go away. They go to a different table. Now they're going to have potatoes and chicken, and the next corner is going to chicken and potatoes, by the way, and that's going to be repeat for the next week. So now, do you have to make a bracha on the potatoes? Do you have to make a bracha on the chicken? Because you've gone away from the Suda. It's a siluk shulchan. So this was a question which raised, and at a later stage, in Tovshin Memtes, his son Reb Yossel, so the Zayin Gesund, writes to him, and the father accepts Reb Yossel's argument. So if you look at on the screen, what we've said here is, this din of siluk shulchan is not only do you have to make a separate bracha on the sweets, which you're going to have at the second table, but even dvorim shedarkum lo v'lelafes apas, even if you've gone away to another table and now you're having meat, you're having vegetables, which are normally part of a meal, but because of siluk shulchan, you have to make a new bracha. So Rav Padve had been concerned. You've gone away from your chometz table, you've gone to a separate table, so you have to make a bracha, rishoina and achroina, on the meat and the potatoes. But then he quotes that there's a Rashba who says, no, that which you go to another table and you have to make a bracha is only for things like fruit, but not for the kind of meat and fish which is normal to have as part of the meal. They're just a continuation of the meal. That's very nice. But the Alter Rebbe has said clearly, like the other poskim, even dvarim shedarkum lo v'lelafes apas, even foods which are normally eaten as part of the meal, they are now detached from the haMotzi. You have to make a new bracha. Despite that, Rabbi Yossel Padve argues that that's different. There, you've had your meal, and now you've gone over to the other siluk shulchan. You got to a new setting. So you might have some bosser v'dogim then, but that's a new thing. That we have to make a new bracha. But here, why did we go away from the chometz table? It's just because we have a problem of, we're not saying we finished eating. We still want to have our staple foods for our meal. It's just because of the worry of the crumbs getting mixed up with the Pesach stuff. And therefore he feels that even the other poskim would agree that that's not called siluk shulchan. So again, although there is a concept of siluk shulchan, the argument is that on Pesach, the fact that you've moved from table A to table B, and you're having your meat and potatoes in table B, is not called a siluk shulchan, because really, if not for the complication of chometz, you would have had them all at the same table, and therefore you don't have to make a new bracha. And Padve, the father, writes, and indeed no one worries about this. This whole concept of siluk shulchan is rather obsolete nowadays. As it says in Shulchan Aruch, we don't have siluk shulchan nowadays. In the olden times, you had people, they're sitting on their heseba couches, that couch, and they had servants bring little tables, taking them away. That whole setting, that whole style is obsolete. So don't worry about siluk shulchan. Number one. Now I want to go on to, though, the next issue, and that is if you are eating your hamotzi in one room, in one space, and then you're going to go to another space. And now I'm dealing with a different question, and that is birchas hamazon, not where you made hamotzi. That's the question I'm dealing with now. So we have, first of all, we have it in the Shulchan Aruch, Osu la'akor b'mkoim klal ad sheyivorach birchas hamazon. If you made hamotzi, you got a mitzvah in HaTorah, you have eaten a shiur, you have a mitzvah in HaTorah to bench. You should not be moving away from that location until you've benched. Later we'll deal with if you had in mind. But meanwhile, there is an isur to move away. So is it okay to make hamotzi in one room if you are fortunate to have a spare room which is selling in chometz, and we'll make a special clause with the goy to allow us to use that room for our Shabbos meals, Friday night and Shabbos morning. Won't worry about trespassing. And then, so you want to have your chometz there, and then have the rest of the meal in another part of the house. What happens with birchas hamazon? So, if you had in mind when you made hamotzi, so this is a common thing that you are invited out for Sheva brachas, and you'll wash and you'll make hamotzi, and you have in mind that you're going to have some dessert, but a little bit of bread also in the second location, then that's okay, because you had in mind to say birchas hamazon in the second location when you said hamotzi. That's legitimate. But if you're not going to have bread in the second location, so are you moving to another location without license? That is my question. So, having said that the bosser v'dogim is a hemshech, so perhaps you could say, okay, the bosser v'dogim is a hemshech in the next room, therefore it's still a continuation of the meal. It's okay. It's not considered a hefsek because it's a continuation of the meal, which is a Kiddush. And the question will be still, do you have to go back for benching to where you ate the bread? Even if you want to say that the potatoes is a hemshech to the bread, but it's not bread. And therefore, you'd have to go back to your first location to bench there. Now, additionally, I just want to throw in another point. That this idea, so someone might argue that this whole business of shinui mokim doesn't apply if it's within the same house. So let's take a look over here. We have this, I think, of Pei Dalet. If when you made the bracha, you had intention to go from one room to the other. So there's a Ran who takes the view that shinui mokim within the same house is not considered a hefsek, and therefore, if in the middle of the meal you go to another room in the house and you had in mind, you don't have to make a new bracha on the food you see in the other house, in the other room. Even if we're going to take that on board, that is for bracha rishona. It doesn't mean that you can bench in the second room. Not evident. On top of that, I'm not going to be of appeal, but I'm going to try to wrap this up. On top of this idea that mimokim lemokim in one house is not considered, and with das is not considered a shinui mokim, is actually machlokas aposkim. The Ran says so, others don't. Look in the Alter Rebbe's Seder, where by bedikas chometz, he says it's slightly different to the way he writes it in Shulchan Aruch. In Shulchan Aruch, he says, when you do bedikas chometz, you should gather your family around you, and you're going to delegate bedikas chometz to some of the male adults in your family, so they should first be boidig a little bit in this house before they go to another house, if you own several houses. In the Seder, the wording is different. They should be boidig a little bit in this space before they go to a different room. You follow? In the Shulchan Aruch, he said it within the same house, no problem. Shinim Mokim with Das is no problem. In the Siddur, he's being choshesh according to the Shittas, not like the Ran, that Shinim Mokim within the same house, even with Das, is still called a Shinim Mokim. Hakalal, as a result of all of this, I would say the simplest solution is that you have your moitzi. If it's a place where if you're going to have your moitzi and your Pesach foods in two places where you can't see from one to the other. If you can't see, but then it's a shinei makom. If you can see, let's say you're sitting in your balcony, you're sitting in your back garden, and you can see the back room, then there's no shinei makom, because if there's a visual contact, that's not shinei makom. But if it's in a different room and there's no eye contact from one room to the other, there is a shinei makom. So I would say, have your Kiddush and make your moitzi, and then have, if you want to have something with it, bench, and you're done. Then take a break for a few minutes, heschadas, and then 15 minutes later, let's say, then you'll come and we'll start the Pesach Dika food meal. And this way, you've finished with the bread, you've benched, done, and now you'll have the rest of what you want to eat. Why do I say you have to have heschadas? Because otherwise, if you're to bench and right away going to eat again, why do you bench? It's a question of bracha shenesicha. If you are to bench and right away start eating weiter, it's questionable. Unless you're doing it to make up your mea brachas, that's another discussion. But it's more simple that you'll have your chometz in one room, finish, bench, and then a little while later, you'll come to the other location. You'll have your Pesach Dika food. Okay, that's enough for that discussion for the moment. Let's move on. I don't know how we're doing for time. Well, okay, we have a bit of time. Okay, Kitniyos and Erev Pesach is that now we know that Ashkenazim don't eat Kitniyos on Pesach. If you have pets, like a parrot or something, you can give them Kitniyos, although it's your Ashkenazi's pet, but their parrot didn't become an Ashkenazi, so he's allowed to have Kitniyos on Pesach. Having said that, pet food bichlal has to be kosher lePesach. It mustn't have any grain there because of the likelihood of chometz. And every year we have this shilas, people who have animals which feed on chometz. How do they cope? If it's a fish tank, you can buy a capsule of food which will feed them for the week, and you will include your fish tank into mechiras chometz. If it's a cat or a dog, that's going to be a bit more complicated. They'll have to somehow understand that over Pesach they belong to the next door neighbor who is going to put them out, and you're going to give the cat and the food away to the neighbor for the week, and that's where they'll have chometz. There won't be any chometz available in their regular home. But coming back to Kitniyos on Erev Pesach, so there is an argument to say it's not real Pesach yet, but the minhag is clearly, you can see it has here, the minhag clearly is not to have Kitniyos on Erev Pesach either. If there would be a need, there's room to be makel, but generally it seems to be anticlimactic. You've built up, you're prepared for Pesach, and everything is, looks like a spaceship inside, and now it's all, and now you're going to start taking out Kitniyos and what you're going to serve it in. It just doesn't make sense to me, unless there's a real tzorech. As you see, the minhag is not to have Kitniyos from the zman where you stop eating chometz. I'm going to move on. Now, this is now hashlama to Purim. I didn't give a shiur last week because Purim night, I didn't think it was appropriate to give a halacha shiur, and Motzei Shabbos was too late. So this came up that if you remember, it was a long time ago, it was Purim, and it was on Friday, and people were concerned about starting off a meal on Friday and then going into Shabbos, to enable more people to be participating in their sort of mitzvah, in sort of Purim and Shabbos. And then the question came up about Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh, that you can make Kiddush in the middle of the meal. And then someone came up, what about that the time when you'd have to make Kiddush on that Friday would be during the 7th hour? And so now as a Maisa that we don't make Kiddush during the 7th hour. And so then someone else came up with this answer of the Rebbe to Rabbi Leibel Grona Alav Shalom. So here is written the following. Rabbi Grona writes to the Rebbe in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, Siman Reish Ayin Aleph. He writes that there are those who are careful not to make Kiddush in the 7th hour between 6 and 7. Anash here are broadly conscientious about this. We avoid Kiddush between 6 and 7. Then writes Rabbi Grona, but there are those who claim, no, that's not the Chabad minig. We're not fussy about it. Because you see, when it comes to Tishri, and Shkia is between 6 and 7, and in 770, but the Rebbe's Fabrengen. He says, Zman Hamiti, loy savings. So he says, there have been occasions where the Rebbe has given instruction for Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh between 6 and 7. Is Haraya, although it says Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe says Yesh Nizharim, the fact that the Rebbe told people to make Kiddush between 6 and 7 in the middle of the Fabrengen, is Haraya that we're not the Nizharim, and we don't follow the Yesh Nizharim of avoiding to make Kiddush in 6 and 7. Interesting, they got a fact, and everyone's getting frantic about it between 6 and 7, and someone comes up, no, it's not Chabad minig. Okay, at any rate, question is a good question. To which the Rebbe answers, Harei oz ein zeh hascholas inyan, that the Kiddush between the Kiddush of Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh between 6 and 7 is not to be compared to regular Friday night between 6 and 7, because here it's the middle of the Fabrengen, it's not hascholas inyan. So to understand what the Rebbe answering, he's saying Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh, he's saying Kiddush is endorsing the minig Anash to avoid making Kiddush between 6 and 7, but when it is in the middle of a Fabrengen, different halacha. So what's the reason for that change? The Rebbe doesn't explain. So let's come back to this is from a sefer called Oilas Tomid. Oilas Tomid, or Oilas Shabbos, is quoted often in the Magen Avraham. So that puts him about 350 years ago. And he writes the following. Every little child knows that on Friday night, you go home and you're accompanied by two malachim, the good one and the not good one. And if it's a nice table, the house is all welcoming. So the good malach says, I want again next week. And the other malach has to say, Amen. And if it's the other way, it's the other way. Everyone knows this thing. So now the Oilas Tomid says that the good malach and the other one is alluding to the two mazolas, Mazel Madim and Mazel Tzedek. The Mazel Tzedek, which I believe is Jupiter, and its patron malach is called Tzadikael, Tzadikael, and the Madim, which is Mars, its malach is Samach Mem. We don't say the full name. So these are the good malach. This is the good malach is the malach of Tzedek. That's the mazel. That's the planet, which is, so to speak, dominant in 5 to 6 on Friday. And from 6 to 7 on Friday evening, that's when Mars is the dominant mazel and Samach Mem is the. So those are the two malachim. And v'hinei toiv shelo yekabel hashabbos b'memshel sarah rag b'memshel hatoiv. It's appropriate, it's advised that you should greet the Shabbos not under the dominance of the not good one, rather under the memshelas, under the dominance of the good one, and then the negative one will have to answer Amen. So what I'm sharing you with is just simply that the mazolas business, the 6 to 7, it relates to the two malachim, which everyone knows from the Gemara Shabbos, the good one and the other one. Now, having said all that, he says, don't launch Shabbos in Memshel Sarah. Possibly this is what the Rebbe is answering. Ein ze hascholas inyan. Here, we've started the bringing an hour ago. So it's not haschol. We're not starting under a negative mazel because it started already now. Okay, technically we have to make Kiddush now, but it's a Kiddush which is not a start of an event. And therefore it's not a problem of making Kiddush then between 6 and 7. I believe that's the pshat of the Rebbe's answer. We'll go on. So now here's a shaila. If I can revert back to Purim mode, there's something which says, I think a lashon of Zohar, that called iska de Shabbat kofel. Shabbos, you have everything is double. So you have a double, two kugels and two types of fish and two types of flesh. And here's a shaila about giving a child a second layer of a pamper. The reason being because mummy's going for a walk, and the toddler may need to have a change. And so the question is but she won't have a change where she's going. So she wants to put on the little child a double layer. And then when will come the time when necessary, she'll take off the dirty one and then put on the clean one. So this is the question. Are you allowed to take this toddler on a walk on Shabbos with a double pamper? That was the question. So are you allowed to? So here we have from Shin Mem Gimel, which is Hilchos Chinuch. You're not allowed to give a child a live locust. This is before clockwork toys were invented. So a locust might fit the bill, but you can't give them such a thing because it might die and they might enjoy it for supper, and they're not kosher. I believe that's what we're talking about. I think it's a not kosher chagov. I think so. Then he says, so you're not allowed to give a child a tray for food. If a child eats something not kosher, you don't have to stop him, but you're not allowed to give a child tray for food. And then we have further in Sim Shin Aleph talks about bells woven into a garment, and as you walk around it jingles. It talks about giving a child such a garment which has got jingle bells, and that's also a problem because you are feeding the child an Echil Shabbos. So that's not okay. You cannot feed a child Chil Shabbos. So therefore, putting on if carrying a second pamper is considered carrying, so you are feeding the child an Isser of carrying on Shabbos. Now, there are those who are much more lenient about children carrying stuff on Shabbos. Particularly, you got the Chidusharim who lived in Varsha, I believe, or in Ger, which is near Varsha, and you've got other poskim who take the view that's okay, and they're relying on the fact that we don't have Rosh Hashanah Minat Torah nowadays. I suspect that it's more the Polish poskim who are mekel, and that's because in Poland it was more common to have an Erev. The odd time when the Erev is not functioning, okay, so then they were mekel to allow a child to carry because that was the Yotzim in Haklal. I don't see this allowing children to carry in Russian poskim, and I haven't seen that in Russia it was common to have an Erev. So on that basis, and nowadays in big cities like London or whatever, I'm not happy to rely on Einon Rosh Hashanah. You've got millions of people. It's difficult to say Einon Rosh Hashanah Deiraisa. So I'm worried, and that's on the one side. On the other side, so we have a klal that first of all, the Alter Rebbe has this great chiddush in Shin Chof Ches that you're allowed to do a melacha, even a melacha deiraisa, for the benefit of a choile, she'ein b'sakona, as long as you do it in an unusual way. So always I tell people, you're in a hospital, you need to use the pad to press to go up on the bed, off the bed, up, down. You're allowed to press it with the back of your hand. You need to use in a bathroom, and it's going to be there's a sensor. You walk into the toilet, the sensor is going to switch the light on. So it's a need. All right, so walking backwards. So you're allowed to activate a melacha, even a melacha deraisa, so long as you do it with a shinui. So now, then the next point is that the needs of a young child are equated to the needs of a choile, shem b'sakona. And consequently, if this child needs to have a pamper at a later stage, it's a need for the child, so then to carry it in an unusual way would be okay. I think wearing a double layer is not a usual way, and therefore it's Melacha Sheloi Kedarkoi Letzorech, for a tinnik who's got the needs equated to a Chayil Hashem. On that basis, it's okay for the child to do so. Right. Here I have a question of a young man who was very concerned about his tefillin being the middle, and he, after using, well, the Alter Rebbe is very emphatic. It's important for the tefillin should be mamish in middle. Now, just to explain a little bit, we all know that the tefillin belong over here, because it's a beinei necho, and the Gemara says not beinei necho on the bridge of your nose, because it has to be where there's the hair. And all right, so we know the tefillin is meant to be above the hairline, but in between. But how accurate does it have to be? Can it be a little bit off center? That's not so evident from the Gemara. The Alter Rebbe comes up with this big chiddush, and he put it in the Seder. It's not in Shulchan Aruch, it's in the Seder. It says that these two parshas have to be on the right. These two parshas only have to be on the left. Okay, so between the left and the right, there's only a mashu. There's only a very small space between the right side of the tefillin and the left side of the tefillin. So you have to have it mamish in the middle. And as we know, the Alter Rebbe was particular to he used a mirror, at least when he was on his own. He used a mirror to make sure that it's filling on the middle. So okay, since boy he used the mirror, and then he took a stick, and he put up a stick from his nose up till his tefillin, and he saw that his mirror had been misleading him, because the stick showed that it was off center, and unfortunately, I correctly diagnosed him as being OCD, which someone who suffers from it, it's not a joke. It's a very difficult situation. Okay, but I told him he doesn't need to use a stick, and he went a bit back and forth, and I told him the following yesod. HaTorah lo nitno lemalachei hashoris means the following: that Torah does not expect us to have the truth objectively. The Torah expects us to do what we can do, even if the objective facts may be different. So for a different example, there's a whole entry in Encyclopedia Talmudis about Torah lo nitno Torah lemalachei hashoris. You can read up more there. For example, tefillin have to be square. I can assure you that most tefillin, if you'll take a micro ruler, you will see that the tefillin are not mamish square. It doesn't matter, because the Torah expected us, as humans, to make tefillin square, and what looks to us as square is good enough. And coming back to the tefillin, what looks to us in the middle is good enough. To start having to say that you have to start taking a knitting needle and stand and puffing and stand in front of a mirror to make sure that the mamish is in the middle, Torah does not expect that of us. You don't have to do that. That's the point which I made to him. He should relax on that, and especially he acknowledges he has a difficulty. There's an answer of the Rebbe, which I've quoted in the Siddur. That's how he got this conversation. He apparently was someone who's had this problem of anxiety. And the Rebbe says, Torah says you can rely on someone else. In Shul, you ask someone else, is a kosher yid, he tells you you're tefillin in the middle, done. Torah doesn't expect him to do more than that. Want to use a mirror, okay. And I told him, use a mirror once, but don't have to keep on checking the mirror either. And certainly not mechuyev to use sticks. Torah lo nitno lemalachei hashoris. It may be that it mamish is slightly off center, but you've done what the Eibishter wants you to do, and that's what expects you to do. That's good enough. Our last thing, which we have for tonight, and that is about someone that was asking the following: if it's already after Shkia, and you haven't had Shalosh Shudas. So we know that I mentioned this at the beginning of the shiur. After sunset, you shouldn't be eating until Havdalah. If you wash before sunset, so then you can eat. Then this is, well, the truth is, it doesn't say about washing. It says which is actually helpful for our discussion about the food served before sunset. It doesn't say it has to be you wash, but that's certainly the common understanding. It means that you washed and you're middle of a meal. Fine. There's a second opinion who says that you are allowed to start a meal even in Bein Hashmoshes, so long as it's not Vadei Laila. I was 3 weeks ago. I was in Shalayim for a Shabbos, and I went to a Shalosh Shudas, I said Verbrengen in Mayone Yisrael, Chaim Shalom Deitch was Verbrengen, and well after, about half an hour after Shkia, a very Choshev Rov comes in, and he sat down. He made a might. I was a bit shocked, but there is such an opinion that you're allowed to make even till Vadei Laila. V'chein ispashet aminik b'sudas g'dolos. Now, the Alter Rebbe says you don't have to be moiche. So I was surprised that he relied on that. But be that as it, that's why I was a little bit easygoing earlier about people eating after shkias. Okay. So now that we have here, the Mishnah Berurah says that although he says you shouldn't eat after sunset, but if you haven't had shalosh shudas, so then you should have shalosh shudas after shkia. You should rely on the lenient opinion and have your shalosh shudas, start your shalosh shudas after shkia. So this fellow is asking me, that's with washing. What about having a bit of mezainis or having a fruit? Because Chabad we're not so fussy about having hamotzi for shalosh shudas. Is there a difference? So actually, in my mind, there's no difference. If you're relying on the Mishnah Berurah, who the Chaim Noyer actually brings in Ksasa Shulchan, if he says that you're allowed to Mekayim Shalosh Shudas, you can eat after Shkia. So if you can wash and have bread after Shkia, why can't you have a piece of cake after Shkia? I don't see any difference. Yeah. On the contrary, having hamoitzi is a bigger suda. If you're allowed to start a big suda after shkia because you haven't had shalosh sudas, for sure you can have a smaller amount of food and a less choshev of food to be yaitz shalosh sudas. So that's only if you want to rely on that kula. Okay, that's what I have for tonight, and I'm going to wish you therefore a good evening and good Shabbos, and we should. We're going Shabbos Mevorchim of Nissen. We should see Nissim, Mismach Gula Legula, Gula Mitzvah Bashleimot, Mishmach Shiach Tzidkeinu.
Good. Good show.
Good.